basically want to speak on how do you keep showing up. Basically, how to keep showing up. And more than that, not just keep showing up, but how do you keep showing up in good form? You know, like, because we can all kind of, I think some people would have this amazing ability to just stay in it. But like sometimes you staying in it is probably better that you were out of it. You know what I mean? Because staying in it isn't the only goal. Like just showing up every day isn't the only goal. I think sometimes we maybe live in a world that we think that's the goal. Like we think, oh man, at least I'm still in my marriage. But yeah, you could still be in your marriage and the reason that the marriage is going to fall apart. Because while you are present, you're not like present in health. And while you're there and you've stayed, you haven't changed. And while you have, you know, time has gone by and all the rest of it, like it's just a whole bunch of things. So, you know, I wanted to talk about how do we, in this thing called ministry, which is extended beyond, hey, people, church staff, contributing to the actual four walls, within the four walls of the Sunday experience and anything else outside of it, because that's not all that people, church staff do. But, you know, you that is doing ministry in your workplace, you that is doing ministry as a stay-at-home mum who is really setting the tone. And according to our, you know, what we teach our grow group leaders, one of the biggest things you do as a grow group leader is facilitate. And facilitating isn't just, hey, 7 p.m. cheese board, like all the rest of it. Facilitating goes as deep as how are you creating environments that leaders can speak to, that leaders can come up in, that people can be vulnerable in. How are you facilitating? Not everybody will come to the table. And the reality is there'll always be someone that blames the table for not being set just as they needed it. But the truth is how we constantly doing that. So the single mother, you know, the lawyer that's going in this corporate space and trying to mix, how do I like reach the people that God has put in my life when none of them seem to be God focused. And in fact, most of the people I work with seem very, very comfortable. There's always something that goes beyond the surface. The college student, like the list goes on, but you're all doing ministry. You know, Fallon, who sits in front of people that are broken every single day. Like, how do you keep showing up? Because the truth is that the longer you spend in the wilderness, or the longer you spend dealing with human cycles, of people that say they will change but they don't change, of people that then get bitter towards you, of people who in and excited, like that seed that took real quick but then are out, through to the people that are super faithful, through to, like all of it. It's like a gamut, right? It's life, it's humans, and it's experienced not just in church, it's in families, in everything. So my question, or this like subject today, is how do you keep showing up well? And there's a Bible verse that I think is really, really not the it is not the be all and end all of how to do this. And you know, last kind of group of people, let me say, is those that are like, you're in a season of trial, like whether it's like you're pushing hard to hit a growth, you know, marker that you're wanting to hit, break a cycle, in a storm, in a bit of an unknown. God's led you into a wilderness. If you haven't heard that message, then I can't remember what it's titled, so very non-helpful of me. But I did speak once, so go through them more. But you know how the Holy Spirit led you to the wilderness. You know, He will lead us to wilderness experiences. Wilderness experiences aren't just because all your friends left you for a minute. That probably has a bigger reason to it. Wilderness is like when God often leads you to something that He wants to build you alone. And that is a prime side note, prime season that most people get offended is when they forget that they were led into the wilderness. So therefore they actually walked in there. There is purpose in it. And they are wondering why people are not riding from civilization to the wilderness. How are you? Are you okay? Like, hey, you're in that wilderness. Like, God led you there. There is something. There is a difference between having a season out and people don't talk to you. That's different. But sometimes there are those seasons of wilderness. And then, you know, so on and so forth. So let me read you a verse that I think for me is always challenging. It challenges my temper. It challenges my temperament. It challenges my character. It challenges the days. It challenges my sleep deprivation. It challenges me in marriage, as a dad, as a leader. It challenges me all the time. He's out. So Philippians 4:8-9 says this. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. So I love that, first of all, it says, you know, whatever is true. And obviously that, I think, is a small subsection of everything that pertains to God, you know. And there's a lot of great stuff here, because really what it's telling us is that, health is a decision to encamp your mind in the places that are healthy.
Yeah, right. That's good.
You cannot be healthy, but encamp your thinking in unhealthy places. You cannot be healthy relationally, but be entrenched and encamped in all the negative thoughts about relationships that you've had. You can't be healthy, but encamp yourself in things that are not pure. See, pure is a great one too, because that is also just the things of certain pursuits, or just, whatever it might be. Sometimes it's as simple as just what you're entertaining, but it's this really great subset of things where it's saying, hey, if you want to have healthy thoughts, if you want to be in a good place, then you need to focus on things that are good.
Right. Yeah.
And so I would just kind of, I want to set that as a great anchor for this. And then I want to just take you through not a definitive, this is what it is, but this is my things that I think have kept me in the game. And there's been seasons that I've been healthier than others, and there's been seasons where I've not been healthy, and there's been seasons I've been good, but if I've ever been unhealthy, brought back to good, it has been these things. If I've ever stayed good, it's been these things. And so maybe these things will work for you too. And so the first thing I would say is, number one is find joy. You really, honestly, I think finding joy is really a matter of focus. It's a little bit like when you love a car and now you see that same model, same color everywhere you go, but you never noticed it before. You know what I mean? I never knew that golden doodles existed, and now I saw them everywhere around the city. I never knew, whatever it might be, right? You start to see it because it's where you focus. And so finding joy is about choosing to camp in the places and the things in the season that are always going to be there. So let me tell you what will always be there, even though you're in a storm, a desert or a struggle or a trial. These things will always be there. God will always be there. His presence and your ability to go and close the door to your room and open your word and put on some praise and worship. That is something that transcends your season, your trial, your storm, and your desert. It is an absolute amazing moment where Moses goes up and meets with God in a wilderness. He meets with God in pain. There's another moment where in the tent of meeting, God and Moses will sit face to face. And this says a lot about God. Because we often go, wow, God was only meeting with Moses, which is really true. But what I love about this little snippet into the word that we get is that Moses would leave, and the Bible said that Joshua would stay behind in the tent of meeting with God. So God wasn't quick to leave because Moses left. God was quick to relate because someone stayed.
Wow. That's good.
And so you could be like, man, the presence and everything's over because Sunday's gone. But the truth is, has Sunday left, or has your frame of mind of worship and receptiveness to that left? So staying behind in that tent of meeting, that is always going to be there. There's always going to be purpose. The purpose doesn't change in the midst of the storm, the trial, the desert. It never changes. You're still there to love God. You're still there to love people. You're still there to speak life. And let's remember that what actually brings life is not just what you bring in, but what you bring out. It's what flows from you that creates life. If a river doesn't flow, it is never going to produce life. It gets stagnant. In fact, inhale, exhale is the exact same concept. There has to be a give and take in life. And we often have been taught that the greatest points of joy come from the get. But the reality is they come equally from the give. And so I think that thing of find joy, find what is joyful in you. Find a reason to praise. It's easy to be in a season where you've got a bad thing going on, that you choose to paint the whole world from that one corner. And then you forget that you've got a beautiful wife or husband, and that you've got great friends, and that you've got a God that saved you, and that there's good things happening, and that there's been good things that have happened. I think you've got to choose to find joy. And for all those that specifically do a lot of people-oriented ministry, and I would even class hairdressers like this because they always sit in the chair with someone and they're always talking through things with them. I would encourage you to make sure that finding joy it's paramount to you getting through this. Because if all you're going to do is see problems and see the trials and see where you're not there yet, you've got to find joy. And it honestly is, I think, with God, more true than anywhere else. You've got to love what you do, not where you're going. And I think that is such, wisdom from whoever has spoken it and sages. It's not just a hippie saying, right, enjoy the journey, not the destination. It's because destinations once reached, it's over. They're fleeting, and they're just so like quick.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like it takes a long time to get there, but the best part is getting there.
Yeah.
Even if it's not just for the anticipation that is held there.
Yeah.
But the reality is once you get there, you're there, it's done, it's achieved, the luster is lost, it's but for a second, and you're left looking for more.
Yeah.
And what we often do is we anchor to the destination.
Yeah.
So we're like, when I get there, I'll be happy.
Yeah.
When I hit this milestone in earnings, I'll be happy.
Yeah.
When I get married, I'll be happy.
Yeah.
When I live in this place, when I have children, when I start a ministry, when I'm able to do, when I'm able to reach, when I'm able to speak, when I'm able to give, when I finally go on vacation, when my kids are at this age, when my puppy no longer pees and poops everywhere in the world, like, I'll be happy. And it's all anchored to a destination. The problem is that when you get there, just by the simplicity and the mechanics of it, your joy is gone because you're there, and the joy was that there was filled with hope and arrival and a place. And so in ministry, like, I think it's important that you find joy in what you do every day. Like, you've got to find joy in the work, and you've got to have joy in your doing, not in your receiving. So I've got to find joy in being able to speak to the person in pain. I've got to find joy in waking up in the morning. Like, I've got to do those things. And if you can live a life where you're good. By the way, finding joy is a muscle and a craft.
Right.
Like, you got to get good at it. Some people are great at it. Sarah's great at it. You know what I mean? Other people are not. And it's a craft. And even just like neurologically, you know, like the more you think, the more you embed pathways, and thoughts are like water. They go through the path of least resistance. And sometimes the greatest thing to change your thought life is place some resistance in front of the ways, places that your thoughts always go. So if your thoughts always go negative, go back to Philippians 4, verse 8, chapter 4, 8 to 9, like, and speak that, you know, and keep putting a blockage so that, you know, thoughts don't run rampant anymore. Finding joy is both a craft and a muscle, and it's got to be exercised, and you've got to get good at it. Number 2, stay committed to resolve. You know, resolution and resolving is a commitment. It is laborious. It is not comfortable. It is not the quickest or simplest way. But I know this, and you do too, that nothing quick or simple is worth living or building on. If it's quick and simple, it's never real. I hate to break it to you, but you did not get emailed by a long-lost African prince that needs you to help them receive the money that they need, and now you will be paid a handsome fee of $1 million. Like, that's not going to happen, you know? And no, you are not the one that has a distant, cousin in England who's linked to the royal family. And the royal family, with all of its lawyers and all of its help, needs you, through an email account that says, something at Hotmail, like, but why do we fall for it? Because there's a propensity for easy. And resolve is just not easy, and you can't build on it, on a lack of it. And this is what isn't resolve. Resolve isn't you resolving, meaning I'm going to decide to just walk away from the thing that hasn't been fixed. I have resolved that I just won't talk to them. That's not resolve. Resolution is when two people or you yourself take a concept. So here's another one. It lives in the conceptual and it lives in the relational. In the relational, resolve isn't you going, screw you, I never needed you anyway. That's not resolve. You know what I mean? That's just coping. That's running, that's hiding, and eventually you'll just run out of people. You know what I mean? And run out of team, and, all of the rest of it. And that can even happen in marriages. Fine. I see this a lot in marriage. Fine. I'll just never depend on this one area from you ever again, because clearly it's never going to happen. So, done. Resolve. No, it's not resolved. You've just run. Resolve is when you sit, relationally wise, across from each other, you talk, and you learn. You personally both take ownership, you grow, you glean, and you move, And that scale of ownership sometimes is, by the way, in a perfect world, for everyone that just wants what they think is justice, the scale of ownership is always 50-50. Well, it's not. Sometimes, honestly, it's 80-20. Sometimes it's 95-10. 95-5. Sometimes it's 50-50. Sometimes it's it just ebbs and flows. There's moments that Ords and I sit and we do this, and it's like totally majority my fault, and sometimes it's majority her fault, and sometimes it's both of us. And it just is how it goes, you know, like, and when I sit with my kids, like, why'd you punch him in the face? Well, because he did this. And, you know, sometimes it's okay, I'm not going to say you both had 50-50. It's sometimes not 50-50. And that even goes for relationships where someone's wandered and you know, been unfaithful. It's not, sometimes it's 50-50, sometimes it's 90-10, sometimes it's, you know, and so on and so forth. And I just think that relational constructs just don't mean that ownership is 50-50. It means that everything is just, you know, in the moment of that context, but you got to commit to resolve. And then so that's on the relational front. And on a leadership relational front, you got to resolve with the people you lead and the people you follow. Hey, I didn't like this. Okay, well, why? If it's a feeling that is causing you to change your thinking, you've got to go back and address the feeling. It's not over if you're not over it. And you're not over it if you keep thinking about it. And you're definitely not over it if you've got to talk to everybody about it except for the person that you've got to talk to about it.
Yeah, that's good. That's very good.
You're not over it. And it's not just a feeling, and it's not just that, like, there has to be conversation. I want to even now encourage and challenge people in the room that maybe don't feel like they do processing quick enough, or conversations, they're not comfortable with them. That's not an excuse. Because just because it's a reality, and there's other messages and resources that could help you change that. But if you know that, you can't just sit there. You can't just sit in the place of like, oh, I just don't like to talk, or I'm not good with my feelings, or it makes me anxious to show up. You've got to deal with that. Because what that is doing is handcuffing and hijacking the relationship to the lowest common denominator of I just can't. Well, you just can't, or you just won't. You know, same to the person that said, well, I just can't control my temper. No, you can. You have to. And you might not now, and it might be valid, and there might be reasons, and that's good. Like, that's the difference between ownership is not like, you're not ignoring that there are factors. You're just choosing to say, I have responsibility over the factors, and there is a response that is within my ability for these factors. So, I'm not a good talker. Great. That is genuine. Now, your response is to own that there is an ability for me to go get a book, and I'm going to respond by doing so, and then I'm going to also go talk to someone. That might be varying degrees of professionals through to maybe a grow group leader. Depends how deep the problem is and how wide it's spread will determine who can help you with it. And sometimes it's a combination of all those people. But it has to be an understanding that, like, that's got to run, right? So that's in the relational quotient. Now, resolve also happens in the, like, in just the thinking, like just the way that you, like, approach life quotient of things. Like, so you got to get resolve on experiences. You got to get resolve on the fact that, you know, it was a rough month. You got to get resolve on COVID. You got to get resolve on the family member that passed. You got to get resolve on the prayer that you didn't think was answered. You got to get resolve on the fear you have of getting up on stage. You got to get resolve on the fear you have of showing up for life. You got to get resolve on the areas of life that have been haunting you, not changing. You got to get resolve on that. You cannot simply run. You cannot simply quit. You cannot simply think that packing up a life and moving it to new ground will mean that the seed is going to produce different.
That's good.
The soil might determine how quick and how long and how well the seed grows, but the seed is the seed.
Right.
I can't take an orange seed and plant it in Yugoslavia. Oh, that's no longer in existence. Well, there you go. Time and space even can't fix it, right? But I can plant a seed in Australia, and I can plant it here, and maybe the environments are more conducive than others. But the truth is this: if the seed is ever going to take, it's always going to be an orange. It's just what it's going to be. So at the end of the day, you've got to start addressing the things that you're sowing and the seeds that you have. And if you've got seeds that are there because of your brokenness, you've got to deal with them, because moving and changing plots of land is not going to change what you reap.
Right.
So, like, you have to deal with this stuff. And so I think for me, there's been things like I've had to deal with my fear of failure. I've had to resolve that, because what it kept doing was prolonging my starts. Because I don't want to start something that I might fail in, or it might... Or it would make me play safe. Like, if I don't give all my effort, then I'm not all to blame, and I won't fully realize that I am not enough. So there has to be resolve for the conceptual. There has to be resolve for the experiences in your life. And in ministry and showing up for God's best, there's going to be heaps of that. So you're going to have to find resolve on the fact that, man, there's a real gap in my leadership, and where God's calling me to. There's a real gap between my knowledge base and where God's calling me to. How do I resolve that? Resolving the fear, resolving the angst. You got to commit to that. And make sure that in committing to it, don't build a backlog. It is unhealthy and unrealistic for you to keep putting things off to the back burner until everything in the room that you have put and labeled the junk room no longer can hold, comes crashing out on top of you. At that point, you are no longer just doing maintenance, you've got a full-scale cleanup. So you've got to keep thinking, how do I do this consistently? And if it bugs you, it's only going to get bigger. So you've just got to commit to resolve. Number 3 is this: look inward first. Like, you know, the Bible talks about removing the plank in our own eye. And my personal favorite revelation I've had on that particular verse has been that the speck is made out of the same thing that is in the eye. Yeah. Right? Speck and wood. Like speck of dust, it was like a splinter versus the plank. Yeah. So what I find funny about that is that what is in you that is broken will magnify what is in someone else, but just in portion. Right. I always find it the funniest thing that the people that struggle with generosity as a plank in their eye will see the least aspect of a lack of generosity in someone else and make it massive. You know what I mean? Or they will say, I don't give because no one else gives. So basically they're looking at all the little spots but not realizing there's a plank in them. And I think that every time we judge someone is because there's a huge root within us that is abstracting our vision. So I just think that when it comes to looking in first, it is a great practice, because it is a crazy denial to think that everything in your world is simply because of everybody else, right? So you've got to look first into you before you go into your marriage discussion, into you before you go to God even. Like, God, what is this? Like, I've searched my heart. And then David goes further, search my heart. See that there is no wicked way within me. Like, I think it is really powerful. Even David's prayer is an introspective prayer of ownership towards God, and then pleads for God's help to actually search his heart. Right. Because you're not going to see it in your moment of anger or your moment of offense. You're not going to see you in it. Wow. Because you're open. You've got a wound. And all you're going to see is that someone touched it. You know, like, have you ever had stitches or something and someone brushes up against it? You are so angry at the person and frustrated, like, they should be more careful. And it's like this whole thing of what they just did. You're walking around the house like a maniac. And the reality is you just got a wound. And someone bumped it. And you bump that hand all the time, but you don't notice it because it's not cut. But when it's cut, you notice it. And so wounds magnify offenses. And so when you don't stop and kind of look in first, and then ask for God's assistance for searching your heart and your ways. Note that it says this. He doesn't just say, this is a big one. People don't differentiate between their intent and their impact. We know that as a relationship construct because we've spoken about it. But let me tell you how we don't. I'll often challenge someone on something and they will then say, no, but that's not my heart. That's cool and that is good. But David doesn't just ask, God, are there any wicked thoughts in me? He says, search me. What are my wicked ways? He's doing this self-reflective. What am I doing that is just not right? Like, what am I doing that's not healthy? What am I doing that is not great? Like, search me on these things. Because it's not just my heart, but the ways I do things that need to be corrected. And so I think look in first. Number 4, do it for God and not man. At the end of the day, if you find yourself wishing someone would have told you a better job, if you find yourself wishing somebody celebrated you, called you out, gave you a letter, you know, and it's obviously, there's extremes to this. No, I'm not talking the aspects of your relationship. If you're, you know, verbally, that's how you receive, you know, love is through words of affirmation. That's different. But even then, you got to balance that, because what is maybe your strength is also going to become your weakness. And so things can either be boom or bust, you know, and they usually live, depending on the environment, they do one or the other. What is boom for you at work is often what will become bust for you at home. So your ability to focus so hard and get stuff done is boom at work. But at home, that's also the reason that you're busting. Because your family doesn't need more work ethic. They need more time. And they need more attention. And they need more love. And so it doesn't always work, right? So boom and bust is really environmental as far as whether it's going to be a win or not in every person's strength. So even if you're words of affirmation oriented, I would just encourage you here, if you are a leader in this house, I want to speak to all of our culture being one that just always does it for God and not man.
Yes.
Can I ask you right now at the beginning of this year to reevaluate every position you're in, to reevaluate every title you hold, to reevaluate every goal you've set, every profile description you said yes to, every spot on team and every roster that you fill, and ask yourself, am I doing this for God or am I doing this for man?
Yes. That's good.
Because the only time I see people get offended is when they were doing it for man. Because all of a sudden it's like, I was doing you a favor.
Yeah.
I was building your world. Well, who told you to build what?
Yeah.
Like, you got to get God on this.
Yeah.
God's got to talk to you about this. And if you didn't hear God on it, like that, I mean, no one else, you know what I mean? So like, I think if I'm going to keep showing up, the only times I can show up well is when I'm doing it for God.
Yes.
But when I'm doing it for man, or when I shift that way, I automatically, there's a strain, there's an angst, there's a difficulty. And I just want to encourage you, make sure you evaluate everything you do and keep asking yourself, am I doing it for God or am I doing it for man? Number 5, set God standards. Let God set the standard for what health looks like, for what ownership looks like, for what compassion looks like, for what boldness looks like, for what grace looks like, for what, set God standards, not worldly standards, not standards from the last book you read, not standards from the last conversation you heard.
Yeah, very good.
I have found that there are 2 types of people in this world. Only 2. That's it. But I'll say this, that when it comes to certain problems, I will say that there's areas of people's lives, better said, and the way they process can be broken up into these 2 main ways. The first one is, some people consider and set standards from their context, and other people consider and set standards from their convictions. Those who set and consider standards from their convictions are always processing from the same place. So their life is generally consistent.
Yeah.
They also don't get swayed. They don't also find themselves convinced by perspectives very easily.
Yeah.
So they don't just watch something and all of a sudden they're over here, and then a little bit of time here and they're over here, and a little bit of this season and they're over there, and a little bit of time with this person and they're over here, because that person is setting and judging standards from their context.
Yes.
Wow, I've never thought of it from that perspective, and now that I'm sitting here, and that is great from an empathy perspective. That's a muscle that is good, but it's not a muscle that you make decisions from.
Yes.
Very good.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, can you make your decisions from a God standard, and from that God standard, evaluate the season you're in, evaluate the information you're gaining, evaluate all the things that are happening. When you can do that, I think there's a great consistency that comes from that. And so for me, I had to evaluate ministry from a God standard, not from a current Christian culture standard. Okay, what does God want me to show up and do? And what does God celebrate and deem as valuable? And what do my peers deem as valuable? And what do they say is good? And which one am I living for? Because one says that I should have 5,000 by now, and the other one says that I should also be able to never step over the 1 to get to the 5,000.
Right.
So there's I have to set my standards from what God, and there was a lot of cleaning up in that way for me. And so I think that in every area of, if you're going to keep showing up, set God standards. Don't let your season set your standard. Don't let your failures set your standard. Don't let your finances set your standard. Let God's standards be the ones that do things. 6 is this: sift through the dust. You know how people often say, when the dust settles?
Yes.
I think as a leader, you've got to have an innate ability to not wait for the dust to settle and sift through it. You've got to see through the dust, better said. You've got to find a way to, when the fog of craziness and storms and war hits you, you've got to be able to you've got to see through the dust, and you've got to be able to make make the decisions while it's dusty, because on the other side of that, when it settles, you're going to keep moving. And sometimes if you're going to wait for the dust of life to settle, it's going to settle on you. And then when it settles on you, you're in it. And you are part of the environment and the collateral that the dust left behind. So don't let the dust settle on you. See through the dust and keep moving through things. Seeing through the dust is often about doing the first 5 things. Seeing through the dust is actually learning to kind of see through your fears and see your faith. So for example, Is this all going to collapse? Is this all, that's all dust. But your faith says that God is true to his word and that every word he has spoken will not return to him void without accomplishing the very purpose that he said it for, which is in Isaiah chapter 55.
Yeah, that's great.
So that is like the kind of stuff that I think leaders need, because dust can make people panicky. Those dusty seasons before it settles make people ready to move. Those dusty seasons will actually elevate and heighten your insecurities.
Yeah.
The dust doesn't mean the world's coming to an end. It just means things are up in an uproar for a minute.
Right.
And I think good leaders and people that can see and keep showing up need to see through the dust.
Yeah.
And then the last one is always anchor up.
Ooh,
And this is about relationship.
that's good.
Always anchor up. So you can relate side by side. You can have fun side by side and down. And hopefully you can do all those things up, but only choose to anchor up. There are relationships that are up relationships. There are relationships that are like level, and there are relationships that are a little bit lower, meaning that the lower ones are the people that they're not ever going to feed into you, into the things that matter. They're not a friend to your destiny.
Yeah.
They're not someone that's going to... Now, you can learn from everyone. Like, anyone at any moment. My kids say amazing things. I'm like, whoa. But, like, they're not literally there to feed me spiritually, right? Or lead me in my thought life or help me with my practicals. Like, they're just my kids. But they do teach me valuable lessons, and that's amazing. So I'm not saying that can't happen. What I'm saying is the theme of the relationship is that that's not what's really going to happen.
Yeah.
And so there's those relationships. There's the side ones where, hey, it's pretty level and it's great. And that is good because they're at the same place you are. But that doesn't mean they're going to take you up from there. In fact, what will happen at that level is their health will also now become, if you anchor that way, what they are, you will be. So if you anchor to the side, their health and their seasons and their storms will determine your perspective. It'll determine where you're at, where you're going to go. But when it comes to anchoring up is where you want to be. People that are ahead, people that have fruit, people that are bigger than you, people that grow you, people that are not. When you can anchor up, now all of a sudden you have a security in your life that's going to help you keep showing up.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't understand the difference between relating down, living sideways, and anchoring up. What most people do is they anchor sideways, they anchor down, they anchor everywhere. And usually they anchor everywhere but up. Because up is uncomfortable. Up isn't always about fun. Up you feel small. Up you feel out of your depth. Up you often feel like you're failing. Up you feel like you don't know anything. Why? Because they're ahead. But if you can embrace those things and realize that as they're growing and you're failing, you're moving forward.
Yeah.
Wow. That's good.
So you want to be the smallest person in the room.
Yes.
In some rooms. You want to have a room you're anchored to where you are the smallest.
Yes.
And you are the spiritually smallest, the thinking smallest, the habitual smallest. You are the everything smallest because you want to anchor up. When you can anchor up, it'll challenge you. But if all you are is anchored down and anchored sideways, well, the truth is that like you're just not going to make it
Yeah.
because it's just not how it goes. Everyone has to anchor up. And I think in ministry and life, you know, one of the hardest things to do sometimes anchor up, but it's a decision, it's a hunt, it's a choice. And if it's a theme over years that you're not anchored up, that's you. You know what I mean? So like you've got to anchor up. So, and anchoring up means as well that when I anchor up, I become the chaser, not the chased.
Yeah.
So I don't wait for Mark Hopkins or, you know, I don't expect at the very least, right? Like I don't expect Mark to chase me. I don't expect Lee Burns to chase me. I don't expect that John and Helen Burns will chase me. Like I don't expect that Chuck and Oshana will chase me. Like I don't expect that. Like I expect that if ever the relationship is in jeopardy, it is me that will make the first move. It is me that will reach out. And I am also not offended when I don't hear back because I've anchored up. So their world doesn't look like my world. Their world is busier than my world. Their world has other people that are anchored to them. Their world has a whole bunch of things. And even that's spiritual maturity, right? Like, and I had a great conversation with someone. I thought it was really fruitful as far as the concept. And it was a simplicity of like, we were talking about like, hey, what does it look like to be spiritually fathered and to have spiritual maturity and all that kind of stuff. And what I thought was really great about the conversation as we spoke was the fact that this concept, I think, is really good and mirrored by the human growth span. So like, obviously, right, when I've got a baby, like I said on Sunday that I did that dumb thing with Cruz, I was like, Like, this is ridiculous. And Audrey's like, well, who else is going to feed him? Like, oh, that's so stupid of me, right? But if he's like 14 and I'm running in the middle of the night and giving him a bottle, there's a problem. Because I'm giving him the same food that was appropriate at 1 at 14. When at 14, he should be getting his own food and doing his own things. And you know what I mean? And so I think when it comes to this idea of spiritual maturity too, is that as you grow, the frequency in which you sometimes are desperate in need of that person, it does become less because you've reached an adulthood. But it should never become an island. So you reach adulthood, but you never reach an island. An island is not the same as being mature. Adulthood means that you now know how to feed yourself, and you know how to go into the things. And here's the good thing. Don't feel bad if you're not at adulthood completely yet. But ask yourself, should you be? And is it either you have not chosen, you have not invested, or maybe there's something you have not addressed. There's a wound. There's an obstruction. There's something that you got to go get, like, and speak to and find. And then, you know, that's part of it too. But the beauty of standards is that they give us a reference point whether we are ahead or behind. And so on that concept of like anchoring up, like I don't find myself having to call, you know, when I was talking to this person, I was saying it kind of more transitions over time the same way that my relationship with like my dad or whatever has been. It's like, I don't call him every day to go, Dad, what's for dinner? Now I call him to go, Dad, like, what did you do at this point of your financial life? Like, Dad, what was it like raising me at 14? Actually, I don't know. So, you know, like, it's those type things. Or, hey, Mark, like, ministry now. Like, 30 years.
Wow.
This is what my church looks like.
Wow.
I can only see it from my perspective. What do you know that I don't know? You know, it's different questions, but they're not every day. Like when I first got saved and I would ask my youth pastor, I had a dream and I don't know if it's God or not. You know, or, hey, how do I read my word? And, hey, I'm struggling with praying. And, hey, every time I get angry, I get destructive and I want to just go back to my old life. That was frequent, and those things was, you know, and I don't ask those things anymore, because if I'm still asking those things and if I am still attributing my lack to their lack, then the reality is I've not matured and crossed over to where I need to get to. So, you know, on that whole spiritual formation portion, there is a point where you should be formed. Just like when you go to the doctor and you get, especially these days, you take your baby to the doctor and they know everything. They're like, they ask crazy questions. Shannon probably has seen it now because she's got the youngest one here and a lot of you others, but like they'll go, have they noticed themselves in the mirror and tapped twice? I'm like, I don't think I put them in front of a mirror. Like, you know, like, have they found their teeth and flicked them yet? I'm like, I don't know. Like, you know, very specific things, but they've found like mile markers, I guess, for what maturity should look like at different stages. And it's great because it helps us know a little bit what we're doing. Sometimes it's ridiculous, but, you know, nonetheless, anchor up. Keep looking for relationships and people, and put the weight of that relationship on you to chase, not you to be chased. Because the model of discipleship, I think, is unarguable. That it is one of follow me, not let me chase you. And can I just put another measure out there? Quite often, when you anchor up, and I'll finish on this because I know we've got 3 minutes, but when you anchor up, and you anchor up well, you often get invited into deeper relationship with that person. Meaning, they go, this simple question, they answer to themselves. If I'm close with this person, they're mature enough to let it not get in the way for me to be who I need to be in their world. They won't get familiar with me, and I'll always be able to speak into their world. But what happens over time sometimes is the closer you are there, the more, if you're not in check with it and you don't understand that this is an anchored up, what you do is you start to think that you're now at such a friendship level that you stop expecting to chase, and you find worth and value in the relationship that they love you because they chase you. And all of a sudden the line gets blurred, and familiarity is like yeast. It's a little bit and it works its way through the whole relationship. And it's the reason that Jesus did but a few miracles. It's the reason they they devalued the power that was upon him when they saw him do great things. And it's the reason that a prophet is without honor. And it's the biggest reason that people eventually move on from people is because there comes a point where they go, oh, I've invested enough for them to chase me also now. Isn't it okay for you to chase me a little sometimes? And the truth is that, like, I just see a lot in the Bible of follow me. And in extreme ways, like Elijah and Elisha, through to Jesus. Like, Jesus was just as okay with the people that followed him as the ones that didn't.
Yeah.
And just logistically, we've said it a million times. It's easy for 12 to follow 1, not 1 to follow 12.
Right.
And can I just say, on the fences perspective, maybe some of you struggle with that aspect of leadership because one of your fences has been that you feel like you never want to be that person that doesn't chase people because you never reconciled and went back and understood that there was a relationship that you felt abandoned in, that you were actually anchored up to, and you felt bad because they didn't chase you. And now you as a leader spend all your time chasing. And also at the same time, it is killing you. You're not producing any fruit. And the people that you chase have no reverence for what you do and who you are in their life because you haven't reconciled that aspect of leadership as well. And so I just want to encourage you, like, hey, you're not bigger than anybody. It takes time to serve people. And it's not you're too good to chase. That's not what it is. And you got to check yourself if that's you as a leader. If you're too good to chase because you're the leader, that's not what it is. Now, next week, maybe I'll re-speak a message that I think is just good on this subject. Next week, let me talk about how we chase when we do chase. Because there's 3 parables. I've preached it before. There's actually 4 parables, and I'll speak to every single one of them. You can read them and catch up to it as we get into it next week. And it is going to be the parable of the lost coin, parable of the lost sheep, parable of the lost coin, parable of the lost sheep, and parable of the prodigal son. Those are 3 great measures for how we as leaders and people actually chase people. And maybe I can speak it next week because it's 12 o'clock.
That's good. Amen.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming to Staffy. If you're online and joining us from somewhere else and re-watching this is what we do inside. We focus on speaking to the people in our house. And if it speaks to you too, that's awesome. But thanks for watching.